So, ladies and gentlemen, all I can say is that this podcast will be a little bit of a trip through time. Now, for a lot of my colleagues and my readers through the years, especially the ones in Carleton County, have no idea my connection with the 1995 Quebec referendum vote. At the time, I had shifted over from the Dalhousie News, which was the award-winning paper at Dalhousie, New Brunswick, which merged with the Hamilton Tribune. And covering Hamilton was quite interesting because a great part of Gaspé, Quebec, including uh, New Richmond, Pointe-la-Croix, Listagouche, had very close ties to Hamilton. So when the referendum vote came up, especially the day before Halloween, October 30th, 1995, I was a staff reporter with the Tribune, a very good staff. He had assigned me to cover, what's called election night. Now, I did previous coverage of reaction to the vote, and we were predicting something like 54% yes for separation, 46 for a no side, but a big rally on the weekend before the election of Montreal, and some very positive support from Bill Clinton, who said at a public press conference that a united Canada would be better for the world. We knew something was going on. There was rumors of ballot box either stuffing or manipulation in some of the advanced polls. And election night, it was quite bizarre. Let me detail this a little bit because there's an hour difference between New Brunswick and Quebec. The vote totals were delayed because they're so close to the border. Now, instead of showing the first hour of the election recap or vote, we were shown, get this, ladies and gentlemen, a repeat episode of Star Trek: The Original Series. Of all things, the first episode, The Man Trap, where it was a blood-sucking vampire that was killing the different members of the crew and the people on this planet. Well, Jacques Parizeau and Lucien Bouchard, you don't get any more blood-sucking vampires like those two idiots, or the parasite I call Parizeau. See, as an Acadian growing up in Northern Brunswick, especially English Acadian, with Jewish and Scottish and Irish roots, I'm all for diversity across Canada. I have no problem with the bilingual and unilingual Quebecers in the Belle Province, but they were going around like Lucien Bouchard, who was a traitor to the PC government, which eventually he helped kill the PC Party of Canada. And he tried to, Mulroney tried to manipulate Parizeau to be a senator to help pass the free trade agreement. All kind of bizarre stuff. Anyway, I walk around the streets of Hamilton that night, early sunset because it was October. Not a person on the roads in Hamilton. I come back, wait for the vote. In my memory, the yes side was leading by that predicted 5 points. Then all of a sudden, results started to come in from the Aboriginal communities up north, from outside of Quebec City, in Quebec City. It went to 50.0, 50.0, even though the no side had the advantage. And eventually the no side won. Then Jacques Parizeau, in one of the most drunk performances by any politician of all time, went on the stage and basically started doing these metaphysical comments about, oh, next time we will win. This was the second time Quebec had lost a referendum. I think you only got 43% of the vote in 1980. And if they're not going to win with Reine Levesque, they're not going to win anybody. Parizeau quits the next day, as we all know the history. But in his speech, he said something very interesting. It could be translated in Acadian translation is different than Quebec translation. In French, c'est la faute l'argent puis la faute technique. He said basically in translation in French, Canadian French is the fault of money, the federal forces, and the ethnic vote. Now, did he mean specific ethnic vote? He said later on, oh, it was the Greeks and the Jews and Italians. But he did mean the ethnic vote. Did he mean the Aboriginal vote, the Acadians in Quebec, the non francophones in Quebec? What he really meant by that? Like we always mention, there's a scene in the heat of the night where the Sidney Poitier character is talking to his captain on the boat, and the captain basically says, you can kind of interpret, and when Sidney Poitier said, well, I'm not racist. Well, Parizeau was racist. He was racist against anybody that wasn't him. He criticized the Acadians, so did Lucien Bouchard. Lucien Bouchard once said, They're not good to wash their toilets like Acadians, English and French. Now, we had sycophants in New Brunswick. I had a co-worker once that fell in love with somebody in Quebec and became a separatist, even though she was born in St. John, which makes absolutely no sense, like someone born in Israel becoming a Nazi. The Alberta separatists, the Acadian separatists, the Quebec separatists, the Newfoundland separatists, they're all the same. They're not true Canadians. No Canadian wants to separate from Canada. Why would you leave your family if you only get 3 turkey legs at Christmas dinner? Oh, two's not enough. We got to have 3. You don't talk about that. Every country got their faults. I'm sure when there's Italy and Rome and everything else, France, when the Renaissance period, there was a bunch of poor people on the streets dying of typhus or whatever. Nothing's ever perfect. Look at the pandemic now. We're doing successful in 7 out of the 10 provinces, and in the north, and Ontario, Alberta, and Ontario, Quebec, and Alberta and BC are having a hard time. There's no guarantees. Anyway, getting back to the vote, like I said, we were 5 hours away from losing our country. We all thought we were going to lose. The media thought we were going to lose because there would be no more jobs for Canadian reporters. You know, Canada, you're not going to skip and jump over Quebec. But when Pariseau started saying, "Oh, we're going to have the U.S. Army help us out, or we're going to use U.S. currency," come on. He pushed René Lévesque out because he wasn't a true Quebecois separatist. René Lévesque is an Acadian, by the way. His roots are Acadian. He was born in Hamilton. He's from New Richmond, which is a big Acadian population. He was never accepted. He wasn't like FLQ, radical college and bombers and stuff like that. René Lévesque was an employee of the federal government for years, but he was a soft PQ because he was a moderate guy. René Lévesque was all in politics for 2 things: his own ego and the chicks. He had quite a number of women that he chased, but he was intellectual. That's what intellectuals did back in the day. So he's more interested in the women than in party politics. But he wanted Quebec to separate because he believed in the perfect plan. He believed that if people control their own destiny, you have a better future, and that's Plato or Socrates or whatever. But if it comes down to it, it was Lévesque against Trudeau. That's like Duran against Hearns, and you remember what happened there. Hearns knocked him out. I know it's weird making a boxing analogy, but politics is like boxing. Anyway, you're probably asking why I'm doing this podcast. Well, obviously, the 25th anniversary. We're all involved with the pandemic, and someone asked me the other day, he said, "Jeffrey, you've been a reporter for a while. What do you compare it to?" Well, I said I could compare it to the referendum in 95, but with the pandemic, we're all working together. In 95, there was part of English Canada that said, fuck off, we don't need the French. You figured that Quebec would leave, all the French and the rest of Canada would leave. That's not what it works. And Blaine Higgs there, which is called by a good friend of mine a hick, Blaine Higgs once said publicly, all the French are the same. This is the Premier of New Brunswick, ladies and gentlemen. He said publicly, I saw him say it, all the French are the same. What does that mean? Are all the Jews the same? Are all Muslims the same? Are all Americans the same? Are all Canadians the same? We're all human beings here. So the racism, the core party in 87, up until the convention, we had and you know something, if they had their way there, the core party would have won. You would have kicked the French out of New Brunswick. I know it. He told me that to their face. He said, "Baby, you can finally kick them out." And we're still here. People's minds the same way. Chris Dawson, failed minister from Nakwit. If he had his way, he would kick all out the French in New Brunswick. But you can't kick out the French in New Brunswick because we are good at business. We are good at sports. We're good for New Brunswick. We're good cooks and all that. The Quebec French are more nationalists. We're nationalists, sure, but we're Canadian. When you see that Acadian flag there, that's a religious symbol. That's not to do with separation. By the way, an English person, when I told him the star was a Christian star and Ave Maria Stella was our theme song, like the great area, he said, that's not true. Well, I said, have you ever spoken a French word in your life? Imagine an English person telling a Jew, well, why do you celebrate Hanukkah? Why the Talmud and all that? You never question. People's faith are their faith. I know people that think they're witches. I know people that worship tarot cards. I know people that look at yoga for religion. I get people that are Baha'i faith that are gun owners that like shooting off guns. It doesn't make them any worse or better than me. Everybody has the right to be crazy. Some people like Bowman cards, some people like Top, some people like OBG. Diversity. But getting back to Parizeau, again, he spoke English better than any English person I've ever met. The man was like Piers Morgan with a little bit of Larry King with a slight Charles Aznavour accent. But he wanted a Malcolm X type of separation by any means necessary. But when it came down to it, they're saying you want Jacques Parizeau and Lucien Bouchard running this country. So that 2% that they needed, like he claimed, that 63% of the French, it's all craziness. There's no analytics in 1995. The majority of Quebecers, didn't want separation because Parizeau and Bouchard were there. Anyway, that's my editorial. And if half the thing is that an editorial you never heard of, well, look it up. I posted something on the Brunswick Independent Authors Association to break down that 5 hours and the two-part documentary on the battle for Quebec. Well, all I know, my good friend Curtis Keys, I did a feature with him for the Tribune before, a great farmer in Quebec. He said basically Quebec is better off in Canada. And this is a guy who had a Acadian wife. He lived in Quebec. He raised, beautiful children. Some of them are nurses now. Very creative. Canada is Quebec. Quebec is Canada. New Brunswick is Canada. Canada is Quebec. That's how you think of it. And people out there that support Trump in the States, by the way, get lost. You're never Canadians. If you think the States is better for you, don't let the door hit you on the ass. Being Canadian is a privilege. We got our issues, but we're not shooting each other down in the streets. We're not tracking down people with guns because their color of their skin. Go downtown Frankton, and it's all these, even with the COVID, all these beautiful restaurants and locations. People need to understand. You have to wave the flag, but not be like an American. The Americans are not here to tell us what to do. They only believe in manifest destiny. They don't believe Canadians have a right to be here. But Bill Clinton saying that, there's a lot of Republicans in the States that criticize Clinton because he said Republicans get along better with a separatist Quebec. Christ, man, this is bizarre. Anyway, Donald Trump is nothing compared to Jacques Parizeau. Donald Trump, that's the States. If they're all dying of COVID now, the pandemic, that's their own fault. You put it in the president, a bunch of governors. I'm sorry they're dying, but that's just what's going on. Okay? You cannot dance with a 4,000 pound elephant and not be smashed on the toe. If you eat that, you might get sick. Putrid salmon, you might get sick. You see my point here? Don't vote for anybody that talks or looks like Lucien Bouchard, Jacques Parizeau, Chris Austin, Blaine Higgs, Justin Trudeau, everybody else, these self-centered politicians, they're only in it for themselves. René Lévesque wasn't in it for himself. René Lévesque was just there to say, we have a destiny I believe that can be found. I don't think Lévesque was happy with all those car bombs and Pierre Laporte and all that. Of course not. Lévesque was a good man, And Justin and Trump and everybody else, these are not good people. Joe Biden as well. Just same corporate craziness that has nothing to do with country building. The lesson of 1995 is this. You must build your country like a Klingon builds their personality. The battle is not from without, it's from within. Make yourself the best, and it will make other people better. That's what I think. Anyway, that's my toadstool today. They like the frog on the frog on the toadstool, like given the story.